All right. Super excited for this session. We have Janine Pelosi, the CMO of Zoom, with me today, as well as Dan Springer, the CEO of Docusign and the former CEO of Responses, which was one of our portfolio companies here. We all know that Zoom and Docusign have absolutely dominated in two very competitive categories and thrived during COVID. I don't know if you guys know this, but each company has approximately tripled its market cap just since the beginning of COVID. Many founders and myself as well are just in awe of how you guys have scaled go-to-market. And we love to learn from your experiences today. A bit about the session. We'll spend 25 minutes or so, just the three of us chatting. And we'll leave 10 to 15 at the very end for audience questions and participation. So if you have any questions, this is your chance to ask Dan and Janine. All right. Janine, let's start with a little bit of background for both of you. Tell us about your journey to Zoom. What brought you here? What attracted you to the company? You joined in 2015 and coming from WebEx. I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me. And I guess to start, it's the leadership, right? I knew at the time the head of sales, who is now retired, Greg Holmes, and Eric, our fearless leader. Leadership, I think, is critical in bringing in the right talent because it is a relationship, right? And that goes two ways. The product, absolutely, and it was pretty apparent early on that the product was very different than what I had spent much of my career marketing. Marketing a market leader with the WebEx product at the time. And, the ability to come in and build. I'm definitely a builder by nature. So talk about testing your abilities, coming in and saying there's a great product and a great team. Now go figure it out. That was quite appealing.
That makes a lot of sense. How has the marketing strategy changed at all for you between WebEx and Zoom? Maybe just as a follow-up.
Well, there's a big difference, a big difference between marketing a market leader and coming in as the underdog at the time. Almost 6 years ago, we were in a very different place than the entire world, relying on a product as part of their everyday. And, I think it's critical. There was two key pillars, which still are in place today. The first was about awareness. And that was about driving, I would say, a preference for the brand. People forget about that preference part, right? They talk about brand building, but they forget about building something that people want to be a part of and the authenticity. And then the second part was validation, right? We could talk all day long at Zoom about how easy, reliable the product was. But guess what? Everyone is out there saying the same damn thing about their product, true or false, right? And so for us, leaning on, very early on, the analyst community, which was something that now is a heck of a lot more important than it was early on. But like anything, it takes time to build relationships. So that was critical. And then I couldn't believe, those first days of amazing customers that wanted to see Zoom succeed. They were asking me, can I give you a quote? Do you need a video, a case study, you name it? I had never seen something like this. It was like a cult following. Like they just wanted everyone to know what they had found in Zoom. So that was, the gift that I was given when I started, and I knew that was going to be critical. So once again, it was that brand building and the preference for the brand, and then that third-party validation.
Makes a lot of sense. We'll double-click on some of these topics. I want to ask Dan the same question. You've been a CEO multiple times now. What attracted you to lead Docusign? You joined in 2017, I remember.
Yeah. Well, I've been a big fan of the product, and so Janine was talking before. It's great to love your products, and it's even better when your customers really love your products. And, I had heard so many people talk about Docusign. We actually internally call Docu-Love stories, where you meet someone and say, look at Docusign, and they go, oh, I love Docusign, you made my life so much better. And so it's a neat aspect of it. For me, I was kind of who I was and where I was in my career. I was looking for a company who was a SaaS company, thought that was with the software model of the future. I was looking for that had a very strong sort of product market fit, and then values that I thought would be consistent with who I wanted to be. And the fact that Docusign is 2 blocks away is also attractive. But for sure, those are the core things that drove me to be excited. I had known a couple of board members prior. It was one of the fastest recruitment processes probably for a CEO gig, less than a month.
Oh, wow.
Thanksgiving and a Docusign on Christmas Eve. So a busy time of the year. But it was a great fit, and it's been a great 4-year run.
Great. Dan, do you mind just getting a little bit closer to your laptop? It's a little bit harder to hear you. This is fantastic. Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, you were the CEO of Responses, which was one of the first SaaS products in the market, and you took that to a amazing exit to Oracle for $1.6 billion. A lot has changed between the eras of Responses and Docusign, and running companies with a very different tech landscape. Could you just talk a little bit about your learnings from that and how you've done things differently or similarly here at Docusign?
Yeah. Well, Responses was a very different type of company in terms of its fit in the marketplace. It was a highly competitive space, email marketing moving into the overall the marketing cloud. And so we approached the business in a very different way. You thought a lot about competition. You thought about differentiation relative to competitors. And we were very much driven about sort of our market share and our leadership that way. At Docusign, we have such a strong leadership position in this market. There are competitors in the signature business, but not anyone close to our scale. We got about 2/3 of the market, and now we build in the broader agreement cloud. And while we don't have that same share, we have that same leadership position from the standpoint of everyone knows Docusign, and none of the other players really have that recognition. So a very different mindset and approach. We think it's almost exclusively about customer success and a lot less about the competitive dynamics. Always keep a little paranoia, but big focus just on driving customer success. The other big thing for me is when I was at Responses, my ability to initially attract people to the team was tougher. I had to sort of think about building as it was appropriate for where you were. Docusign, the brand is really strong as an employment brand. They're fantastic, kind of off the charts, sort of as Zoom does as well, things like Glassdoor ratings. So you really can be aggressive about thinking about the talent you want to build for the company, the entity you want to be in the future, able to have a much longer term perspective. So some of the differences between the Responses. I loved Responses, and until I was at Docusign, it was always clearly the place I'd gotten the work of my life. And Docusign has just been amazing. And even in 4 years versus 10, at Responses, it has now become the place where I've really been able to do the work of my life.
That's amazing. Both Docusign and Zoom have such strong market leadership today. But I imagine the early days, this was probably one of the biggest challenges to crack, right? How do you differentiate as a horizontal product? I could see VCs easily dismissing both solutions in the beginning as, gosh, these are point solutions. It's super competitive. How do you actually win? And there's an aspect of product excellence, and there's another aspect of go-to-market excellence that's really critical to winning here. We'd love to kind of hear a little bit about just the history of the company in terms of go-to-market strategies, especially since our audience is a lot of early-stage founders who are looking to learn.
Janine, you probably have more to say about that, given the timing you joined. When I joined Docusign, we had about a year or so before completed a $300 million round, so the vaunted F round. So I really wasn't around for some of those product market fits in a serious way. You may have more perspective in talking about the earlier days of Zoom, and so that you're closer to the company. Maybe you can share more for the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I think, look, it is critical in my mind that there is alignment between there's two key relationships. I would say that of marketing and the CMO or whoever's leading marketing and the CEO, because it's an art and a science. And the reality is you can make data go in any different direction you want, right? That's its own segment, I'm sure, in a series like you have going on today. But, you have to believe in what you're doing, right? And you need to say, we're going to make a commitment here, because building a brand and building a company takes a long time, right? Like, I hear people this, year, for example, talk about, such an overnight success and such. It's been a long 9 years or so since Eric founded this company. Spent the first 2 years only focused on product before, he even started focusing on sales had a little bit of sales momentum. Then, for example, I came in right after the Series C round of funding, and the charter to build marketing came at that point. The other kind of key relationship is that with sales and marketing, right? I mean, that is something that I think we've been second to none in really having one clear go-to-market. Like, for example, we don't use the terms, MQL versus SQL. Not because I don't believe in the methodologies, but because I believe even more than that words matter. And it sets this tone that something might be qualified by marketing versus qualified by sales. And that creates friction. Getting rid of all the friction is key, especially in the early days when you really have to focus.
So what did you guys use as metrics?
Leads and ops. And guess what? We came to the table and defined them together, right? Our planning cycles are always done in tandem, right? Like many of us, you work with finance, you kind of decide what you want to achieve from an annual target standpoint. For us, it was, triple digit or bust. Like we were always kind of shooting for the moon. And so we created those plans together. And what we did is we looked at different segments of the business, understood where we had traction, where we needed to go in. I would refer to it as subsidized demand, right? We would build those hiring plans together with sales, their capacity, their productivity models, along with our lead and op targets and what we were getting out of each deal from a net new acquisition and the current install base, right? It's also not rocket science, right? It's math in a lot of ways. So for us, I guess going back, circling to the original kind of question outside of some of the operational logistics, I'm a big believer in frequency. I also don't think that people wake up in the morning thinking about your brand, right? Like you've got to help remind them. We, as with obviously, Dan, these are inherently viral companies, that by nature, if you were operating properly, you're bringing in exposure from other folks just by the nature of your product and your business. And so being top of mind, we were able to kind of go in deeper to the enterprise, probably quicker than most, because the category wasn't necessarily new, but the values, us leading with video, leading with, operating in low bandwidth environments, operating, in a mobile first capacity, those were differentiators that were really attractive. So we, were able to kind of come in outside of what everyone's used to seeing, right? Airports, buses, you name it. If there was a surface, we slapped a logo on it. And that helped us also look bigger, right? By putting an airport ad in San Francisco and, Sydney and London, people would make that trek, and it would also make us appear bigger than we were at the time. So took a very kind of bold approach early on, simple messaging. I'm a big believer in operating at a very practical capacity. And so I think the combination of the different media types, the out of home, which many weren't using. I mean, nobody was operating on the side of a bus back then. I know they've got a laundry list in San Francisco now of companies that want to do that with the simple messaging. I think that's key. And every business is going to be different there.
For sure. I remember you guys started moving to the enterprise route really early. I remember sending Eric leads even in post Series B, and companies were really thrilled to work with Zoom. In the last 6 to 9 months, it's been a whole different world, and I'm sure the set of challenges that both of you guys are facing is quite different, right? Zoom has transformed from just a meeting tool to nearly a universal solution for remote work, and Docusign has seen the acceleration of digital transformation, and now every single process and document is powered by you guys, right? So can you talk a little bit about your biggest challenges in the last 9 months?
Yeah, it's been interesting for us. I'll go and Janine jump in. We had so much success in our core business of signature. And last year, before COVID, we were really starting to see the rest of the agreement cloud take off. Things like our CLM tool, our advanced analytics capabilities. Mm-hmm. And we were feeling really good about that momentum. And we started off the year kind of firing on all cylinders. COVID hit, and two interesting things happened. Those kind of longer lead time purchases that require a statement of work, more people getting involved, maybe even using a systems integrator or something like CLM, those slowed down pretty dramatically. And CIOs said, I can't do these kind of big projects right now. I just need to adjust with having my workforce go home. So that was a big change. At the same time, the demand for e-signature took off. And it was just as Zoom experiences work from home phenomenon created this dramatic increase in demand for the core. And our customers and prospects said, we need to get up quickly on Docusign. Just to give you a quick metric, the previous year we did about 3,000 or 4,000 new customers of our direct customers, so not the web business, but direct sales each quarter. And in Q1 and Q2 we did 10,000. In Q3 we did 14,000. So dramatically different magnitude of people coming on, and almost exclusively those are new signature customers. So on the one hand, it's wonderful and it's been great. Our revenue's grown at rates that have never grown before, our billings as well. But we don't want to lose sight of that vision of becoming the Agreement Cloud company. And so we're looking forward to hopefully getting this tailwind behind us, which I know sounds ironic, but get the signature tailwind behind us and get people back to really looking at that broader solution around the Docusign Agreement Cloud. So that's what's played out for us this year. Fantastic on the economic side, not everything I wanted it to be on the strategy side for achieving that longer term vision.
Got it. I mean, once you start signing online, you're never going to go back to signing on paper. That's for
sure.
No
one's going back to paper, but the real question is, do we convert them, and this is our work ahead of us, into a broader Agreement Cloud company versus just being using the fantastic benefits of e-signature.
So as you saw some of these tailwinds, especially around the adopter of e-signatures, what did you do from a planning perspective in terms of allocating resources, hiring, managing the company, and changing operationally in such a short time period?
Yeah. So we started on the question, what do you do from a planning standpoint? The answer is very little. We just started reacting. There wasn't a lot of time to plan. Remember, we had the fact that we had to take our 5,000 employees, or at that time it's about 4,000, and have them all work from home. So our challenge was just figuring out a way to keep everything working with this massive increase in demand. So DocuSigners in the kind of March, April, May timeframe, particularly those in customer success, really focused on bringing people on board for adoption, they just worked virtually around the clock and had to figure out how to do it. Sometimes bouncing babies on their laps or with 3 roommates, behind them. It was a super challenge. There was very little planning that went on. I'd like to tell you there was some orchestration going. It was just, really trying to each week just figure out how we were going to manage, the week ahead. In terms of what's changed now, I think we have really thought about building a company for bigger scale. And last year we passed $1 billion of revenue. Next year we'll probably be about $2 billion of revenue. And so we're doubling every 2 years at our growth rates right now. We're put our focus now on being a $5 billion company. We're trying to change that mindset from how do we just solve this week's problems to think about scaling the business to that next level. I'm not talking, infrastructure is part of it, but I mean really scaling the organization. So that's what our team is putting a lot of focus on now. Hopefully we'll do that kind of planning. We won't ever have that same phenomenon again, where we're just kind of going by the seat of our pants, trying to make it all work.
What would you guys have done differently if you knew that COVID was coming? Anything that you would have done in advance or done differently? If
I think there's the human capital side where we probably would have scaled a little bit ahead. There's an infrastructure piece where I think we think about ourselves because we have such a high uptime here. We do 99.999% uptime with no maintenance windows, right? And not unlike Zoom. Early on, we figured we had to do it all ourselves. We're just experimenting with the public cloud now, but we said we just got to build it ourselves to have that kind of confidence we can deliver for our customers. So we probably would have also invested a little bit more ahead of the curve. We were caught up and we didn't have any service disruptions. Our infrastructure team did a phenomenal job. But it was a little closer than you'd like it to be in a couple of cases. So probably the infrastructure side. And then I think finally there are some certain things around automation that we have to think about that long tail. We have over 800,000 customers now, counting the small businesses are over 700,000 of them. And some of the things to do to automate people's process to come on board and to really adopt the software. I think we would have invested faster. We're doing that now. Our digital business would probably be taking a bigger share than it was previously. In fact, actually, I had this conversation with Janine's partner, Eric, their CEO, the other day, and he was talking about how he loves the fact that the marketing team is working to drive that aspect of the business to grow faster because it's a more efficient way to acquire customers. And if you get that process right to onboard them in a digital way, again, super efficient, and it's a better experience for them than waiting for someone to call them back as an adoption consultant. So I think we probably would have tried to accelerate that sooner, which we're doing that now, but I would have done that in advance.
That makes sense. I'm guessing the culture has also been impacted for the team, and going from working in the office to working from home, even though Zoom is a remote tool, has probably had some impact. Janine, any thoughts on culture changes and how you guys have reacted to that?
I mean, is it appropriate to just say ditto to everything that Dan just said? Because I'm literally like, this is exactly like. It's hard to put into words. It really is. When you talk about bouncing babies and roommates and the rest of it, I mean, our employees are tired. I mean, they are, it's really interesting actually, because you go through, I look back and feel like there's really been about 3 stages to the company, right? The first stage is you're just trying to, take the reins and ensure that the company's success is in your hands, right? Like you're just paying the mortgage early on. You're trying to build a company and put it all, in your control. The second stage is going through, scaling your operations, getting, public company readiness, going through the IPO. And then it was basically everything after February of this year. And, this is unprecedented scale and demand and change on top of, everyone having all these things happening in their personal lives, right? It's interesting because Eric and I were having a discussion back in February about how, what's going to be that next mission. Like we're a mission-driven company, and it's fun getting ready for an IPO. Like you have the power of the whole team. You know what your goal is. Revenue's not as sexy, right? Like, I mean, it's fun, but like, it's not that mission. So little did we know that we would, have a mission like we have today to connect as many folks. But I think when you think about culture and you think about the happiness of your employees, it's the connection to what they're doing every day. And our employees know why they're working so hard. Like it's neat. I always describe it as, I have a 7-year-old who's in the room right next to me, doing her school. And it's like, I have a case study right there reminding me, what it's all about, and keeping that perspective and keeping us humble. And that is who our employees are. And we were not a remote culture. People are surprised by this. Like we were in the office 5 days a week. It's just kind of, sometimes when you're that way as a startup, you never change. You just kind of stick. And so we had to go also into being remote. So we were all learning these things while scaling at the same times.
Any tips and tricks?
One day at a time. I mean, honestly, we just focus on executing. We focus on, I had said early on, this was not about sales and marketing. We shifted all of our goals, everything. I also lead our online business and our BDR org and the reps that handle that inbound, right? Inbound calls, chats, et cetera. It was just about how do we take our workforce and make sure that we are serving the customer. It was purely just serve the customer, serve the new users. We were just pumping out content for all these new use cases that frankly didn't exist or existed in very small pockets before. So it was really just, changing the dynamic of the entire team, on the go. You didn't have time. Everything, plans went out the window, to Dan's point. There was no plans going on, right? It was decision making. It was working off of intuition, and it was listening to the customer and what they needed.
With the same kind of experiences, Janine, there's 2 things that I'd point out to your question sort of about tips, maybe in hindsight. I'm curious if you have the same there. But the first one is everyone always talks about the fact that when you have a lot of change, you need to focus on communication. And usually when we talk about us communicating. We talk about a lot of one-way communication, setting up sessions and meetings and making sure we're getting messages out there so people don't feel alone. But one of our big takeaways was we needed communication coming back. We needed to understand what our employees were going through. And again, it's funny, Janines younger than I am. She's got a 7-year-old. I got one out of college and one still in college. Very different situation. Much easier to manage when you don't have little ones. And so I didn't have the empathy initially for that phenomenon of people working on. I was sort of like, I only have a 2-block commute. I don't have a 2-block commute anymore. I can wear my pajamas to meetings, and this is there's some positives to it. But and my kids came home. I was telling people for the first couple of months, it's been amazing having my boys at home, and they can't go see their friends, so they have to stay and have dinner with me every night. It's great. It's better than high school. And I found myself having people look at me and wanted to slap me upside the head for saying that this was, there was a positive at all, in this. So I think listening was really key. We really amped up both from a survey standpoint and just paying more attention. It's probably one we wouldn't have otherwise seen. And then the other piece for us, and I think this has been sort of critical learning for Docusign, is that your culture doesn't need to change. You might need to apply it in different ways, but you really want to have the strength. And for us, customer success, very similar, to Zoom, was such a critical kind of rallying cry for us. So when people were feeling the strain and the stress and trying to just figure out how to get everything done every week, we said, let's focus on customer success. Let's make that the priority. And getting everyone sort of rowing in the same direction around that mission-driven goal, I think helped us. We would not have gotten through those first few months if we didn't have our employees saying, this truly is a mission. It's not just a job. And those would be the two things that we picked up. They're probably similar to what you have at Zoom.
That makes a ton of sense. I think we've also advised our portfolio companies on just the importance of touch points. Before maybe you have a one-on-one once a week, once every 2 weeks. Now it's daily. Let's get on Zoom. Let's say hi. Let's find creative ways to feel connected. Let's send physical things to each other, and let's spend time and really listen to your point. Going back to the concept of mission, both of you guys have talked about that. After an IPO, after people's financial situations have dramatically changed, right? How do you motivate your teams? How do you set the next milestones? And I heard you, Dan, talk about some of the opportunities from the leads and new customers that you guys have generated and converting them and making sure they're even stickier and happier, right? And Janine, now you guys are thinking of Zoom as a tool that powers not just enterprise communication, but also communication for the entire world. But I'd love to kind of understand for 2021, after hopefully we go through COVID and start to go back to some semblance of normal, what are your plans and how are you motivating your teams?
I think part of it is motivating the teams is going back to setting a clear goal, right? And I think for us, we always refer to, Eric, Zoom is this killer app, right? You want to do something incredibly, incredibly well, right? That solidifies your customer base, make them love you. And then you can kind of bring in these other, we have Zoom phone, we have chat, we have our room solution, we have kind of the full communication suite. But now it's really, it's that journey from killer app to platform, right? For example, we launched on Zoom, a platform at our user conference in Topia just about 6 weeks ago that really connects, think about commerce and content, right? So these content creators can come in, connect them with these content consumers in a way that really hasn't been done before, right? Integrate payments, all the rest of it. We know that as folks, haven't been able to meet physically, whether it's, a yoga class, a cooking class, speech therapy, right? There's all these different use cases. Connecting them in with these audiences is critical. So, and then the third part would really be, the marketplace and the developer community, how we think about integrations, right? I mean, this is critical. If there's one thing, I've been trying to focus on the silver linings too, Dan, and you got to have that empathy, right? But I love how much I've been home and been, I'm kind of craving some new experiences these days, as many, but I'm trying to look at the benefits there. But I think it's just important to note that we have sped up the innovation cycle by at least 10 years here, right? And that's kind of exciting. But what it also means is that the consumers are more savvy. They know what they want, and having those best of breed integrations is definitely one of them. I mean, it's been that way for a bit, but we have heard it loud and clear. So really focusing in and really enabling these smaller companies that are building on Zoom. That's going to be unique. That's going to be where we focus and how we motivate. We need to make sure that folks have that clear goal.
Are you at all worried at that post-vaccine, going back to the office, there'll be a decrease in usage? Is that something that worries you and your team?
A worry is definitely the wrong word. I mean, we have brought on so many new customers that, like Dan, what it means is that we have this massive customer base that we're able to do install-based marketing to, and to help them scale, help them achieve their other goals, their other communications needs. So we don't see it as a worry at all, right? I mean, I think there are going to be elements where people are coming back to physical experiences, but even what the office of the future looks like, everyone is figuring that out. I have not spoken to one person that thinks they really like have it figured out, and we're going to need to know. I mean, I think the office is going to be different. Like, I would find it so odd now to get all dolled up and get in my car and go in to go sit at my desk by myself, right? Like, I'd be going into the office to collaborate with others, to, you know, I think it's going to look like these fancy hotel lobbies, to be honest. I mean, they're going to be expecting the fanciest coffees you've ever seen, right? It's going to be interesting. So yeah, I am excited for what's to come.
How about you, Dan? What are some of the goals that you're setting for your team for next year?
Well, I mean, I think Janine put it really well, is people need to see some sort of North Star or some sort of objective that they're going for, and hopefully it's something bigger than themselves. I think that's what motivates, you know, most of our people. They didn't join Docusign because they wanted to be mediocre. They joined Docusign because they wanted to try to do something special and thought it was a place they could do that. So that's probably our top priority. That's why the Agreement Cloud sort of is a macro strategy to say signature is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with signature, and you could build a tremendous business on that. We just have a bigger aspiration. We want to build the next big cloud software category, which is the Agreement Cloud category. So that has people motivated for it. And then the other thing is we have to keep developing people. So we're making a huge investment in our managers and manager training, because there's so many people who have had these sort of battlefield promotions like she was describing. We're asking people to take on more and more, but can we give them the support and training? So I like to say that every employee deserves a great manager, and every manager deserves the tools to be great at their job. And that's been, I think, our other big focus right now, is getting ready for, you're saying, post-pandemic, when we're kind of out of the hair on fire world and back to a little bit more whatever that new normal, I don't know what that even means, but whatever it sounds what you need. I don't know what that's going to look like. Every once in a while I pretend to say I have an answer just so people are more comfortable, but we don't know what it's going to be. But as we find that footing, we want to make sure we're really focused on investing in our managers, because they're the ones that are going to make the employee experience such that the people are going to want to stay with us for the long term.
One of the questions that I think young founders struggle with is hiring, and also, on the other hand, firing, right? How do you determine someone's the right fit, and at what point do you stop investing and let them go? I'd love to kind of get both of your perspectives on that, and as we shift towards some of the audience questions as well. On the hiring front, what is your hiring philosophy, or what are some of the things you guys look for when you're interviewing, maybe questions to ask, or thinking about resume versus aptitude versus drive? Tell us more about that.
I mean, for me, it's a combination of resume and aptitude. I mean, I'm looking for the right fit, somebody that's hungry, that wants to go build something, be a part of something. I've shared that I had an incredibly short interview cycle as well with Eric when I joined. And I to the point where I called my husband and said, I think I just accepted a job. But Eric never used the term, come work here. It was about, come be a part of this, come help build this. And so I look for that. Like that has stuck with me for these years. And, I think folks that are self-motivated, that really, really are continuous learners. If I look at the team that came in that are still with us, many of them are, we have very, very low attrition rates. It's because they have continued to develop themselves, right? We are a very different company than we were, 6 years ago when I joined. And if I hadn't developed myself, I wouldn't be able to be operating as a public company CMO that effectively. And so, it's looking for that in folks. And then the other is, to your question of how do you let folks go, I think it goes back to those, very clear goals. And there's a term I won't use, but assumptions can get you into a lot of trouble. I'll leave it at that. But making sure that there is alignment, right? Assumptions are just the worst in the workplace, in my opinion. So making sure that people really know what's expected of them. I've helped find, because that helps them succeed, and then it also makes for a much easier conversation if someone is not achieving what they need to.
How do you think about the timeline to understand whether someone's performing? I mean, this is one of the
I don't think about timeline, to be honest. I think it's going to vary in every situation.
Yep.
Right? But I do believe in giving folks a chance, right? You want to make sure that you're pointing out that we're big believers in continuous feedback, right? We are not the type that are having 1 year cycles and the rest of it. To me, that is not what it's about. And so if you are having that continuous cycle, then you never get to a place where something can get that bad. And if it does, then there typically is a very different timeline for each situation.
I use something to me, it sounds similar how you're thinking about it. I have a formula for the first half of what you described when I try to get that balance. You said for aptitude and resume. I have 3 variables: people's skills to do a job, the ego that they bring, and so the inverse of ego is being a great team player and really wanting the company to succeed, and then how hard you work. And I take the skills or smarts divided by the ego and raise the whole thing to the power of how hard you work. That's my little, over the years that I figured out, that's what makes people successful in a company. And so when I interview people, I try to get an assessment of each one of those perspectives. By the way, some of it you get from them, some you get from reference checking to understand how they fit in. But I love telling people up front, this is how I think about it, and give them an opportunity to make their best case for why they think they fit well at Docusign, given this role and giving that sort of framework. And then I think it works naturally to your point on the other end. If someone's either not motivated and working hard, or they're starting to sort of betray their behaviors of being high ego, which they don't want to have, or they're not continuing to build skills and apply the skills necessary for the roles you have, it becomes pretty clear because you look at the outputs and the metrics and you go, you're not achieving it and here's why. And it should be a conversation. It shouldn't, particularly for senior people, it shouldn't sort of be like, I'm going to wake up and have someone knock on my door and say things aren't working out. You want to have those conversations all along the way. I have no surprises, one of my mantras. And people need to know if they're not being successful. So when you have that conversation, if it's not working, it's a conversation together about saying, what can we change something to make this get us on the right track? Or if not, let's, you're talented. You wouldn't be here if you weren't talented. So let's go find the right fit for you someplace else.
A couple of audience questions related to hiring. I think one is around thinking about business development versus marketing in the early days. Obviously, this is dependent on this situation and each of the companies, but from your perspective, any frameworks or suggestions on how young founders should think about that? How do you think about the different go-to-market functions and whom to hire first?
I one perspective on that. I think in the early days, it is one. Your business development and your marketing is one. I wouldn't have them as necessarily 2 separate functions because you likely have some kind of sales alignment or motion in play if you have marketing running. And they're going to do a lot of that business development, I think, early on as well. So I think it depends obviously on the business, but typically it's going to be fairly aligned early, and I would start with probably marketing and then pull in BD from there because then it starts to become a bigger mass, and then as you grow you need focus, and that's a great example of it.
Yeah, it's funny. I think outside of Silicon Valley, and by that I don't mean the Bay Area, I mean the tech community broadly defined. I'd always say start with sales or BD first, get market traction, and then try to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. But here, particularly if you think about funding, you think about the venture community, I think it is the opposite. I think Janine's right. You have to start with what do you want it to be. You have to really define what your brand's going to represent and what sort of fit in the marketplace you're going to meet, sort of needs you're going to meet. Then you can start saying, now that I've worked on that, I have a product prototype that might actually fit against that marketing opportunity, is when you need to start testing for product market fit. So I do think it's sort of backwards in the tech space from what you traditionally think. And the reason is, I think the venture capital community here says, we're looking for home runs. And so we're looking for home runs more than we're looking for traction. We need to see traction to prove that we believe something's going to be a home run, but we're not interested in something that looks like it's going to be sort of a perfectly nice business that might be a great lifestyle. We want to make sure it's got a vision and a broader opportunity.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we advise our founders, especially for products that are more horizontal, is that product marketing in the early days is especially important because the first step is to get the first cohort of product market fit, whatever that means, right? And then you can kind of work from there. And so I really resonate with both of what you guys have said. Another a question from the audience is the importance of case studies for your products. How important was that? And was that more of a data point for other customers to buy? Was it really the product that sold itself? Maybe to talk a bit about that as another question.
Well, I'll go quick. For us, I think it's less about case studies in the signature part of our business, and I'm guessing Janine had similar perspective in thinking about the core video conferencing piece. I think people kind of understand what it is, and they understand what value that would have to their organization. Use cases are what was important for us. Instead of say, here's how you would apply this in these different settings, and you'd say, so it's just not like a cool gadget. It's actually a really important business tool. So for us, it was getting clear about what those use cases would be. Oftentimes, we demonstrate a use case through a case study of a customer using it just to show that it's real. It really was about use cases. In the broader agreement cloud, it's going to be, I think, that construct of really being able to show those examples of people using it is going to be more important because it's going to be less transparent and straightforward as a standard signature. I don't know what it's specific.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I would not use the term case study, but what was very impactful outside of the use cases were the logos, right? I think especially when you're getting up into the enterprise, nobody wants to be the first. So having those logos could not have been more critical. And I would give up revenue on a deal to have the right logos, especially when you're trying to expand your business and moving into different, ancillary areas. That becomes critical.
Makes sense. We're just about out of time. I want to ask one last question to both of you. Any advice for founders who are building horizontal products or trying to convince a venture capitalist to go and raise money to back them in a very competitive markets? Any last advice or learnings that you guys want to share?
I mean, big question. It's been a while since I've been at the early stage, but and by the way, when people who spent the last 15 years working at large scale companies try to tell you as an entrepreneur what you should do for your early, I wouldn't listen too hard because they're so lost on the reality anymore. It's like kids asking their parents about stuff they should do in school. Parents don't remember when they were in school. So my sense is, though, that I would put a lot of focus on team and an articulation of why it's a big and special opportunity. There's so many neat companies and so many neat technologies, but the differentiation I see, and so the big successes as well as the differentiation for trying to raise money, is when you can actually describe something that people say, that's something big. That's going to be meaningful opportunity. So thinking about greenfield, thinking about really changing a game, and then having the team that justifies someone saying, well, yeah, that's a big opportunity if someone could do it. Why would this team be able to do that? Why would we be able to either revolutionize the space or create a new one? And I put a lot of focus on getting those right teammates and colleagues and giving up the equity required to attract those folks would be my advice to entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And I have 2% left on my battery. So if I die, I'm not hanging up. I agree with everything, once again, that Dan just said. I think it's really articulating why you exist as a business. And there is not one VC that I have worked with that does not make their decisions based on the team. The team is critical, and it's the founder, but it's also who are those close early operators that are surrounding that founder and also helping that founder to kind of drive the business to that next level.
That's right. I think the ability to tell the story, to paint the vision, and to describe why you have a secret in the early days is super, super important, probably even more so than folks realize. But I've really enjoyed my conversation with both of you guys. This was really helpful to me and to our audience. And I really want to thank you again for your time today, and congratulations on a fantastic 2020. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Connie. That was
fantastic 2020. But thank you. This has been great.
Thank you. One last thing for those of you who are still here. Our next couple of sessions are going to be starting at 2:00. So if you want to know about the latest of e-commerce, open source, AWS, recruiting tech, there's 4 sessions to pick from. Just click on sessions and then you can find the talk for you. Thanks again, everybody.